Thank you for joining us in what is this very busy week for you there. The new Congress will certify the presidential election results. We know what happened last time. Now the national security apparatus is on heightened alert as well, given those recent attacks in New Orleans and Las Vegas. How have these events impacted the nature of these inaugural ceremonies and the security there in D.C.?
First and foremost, my thoughts and prayers go out to the victims' families, anyone connected to such a horrible tragedy. As a prosecutor, soon to be former prosecutor, one of the downsides of that job is that we see the worst of the worst, and it's just heart-wrenching. It's just heartbreaking. And obviously we stand with the folks in New Orleans, and whatever they need, obviously we stand with them.
I want to shift to some of the work that you'll face in this next two-year term. You enter Congress, of course, with Democrats in the minority in both chambers and a Republican president coming into office for a four-year term. Do those partisan dynamics put any limits on tangible items you can deliver for St. Louis?
I think regardless of who's in power, the job stays the same. I was elected to deliver results for my district, and we're going to work with fellow Democrats, but we're also, when the opportunity arises, reach across the aisle and work with whomever wants to get things done for this region. And I believe, even with limited conversations with some of my colleagues across the aisle on the Republican side, that folks in this region want to see this region successful. They want to see this region move forward, and the job doesn't change, and that's the end that we're going to work towards.
Now you get to take on fun questions like raising the debt ceiling. If Congress leaves this debt ceiling in place, of course, it limits the government's ability to borrow money. Do you see that as a healthy restraint in uncertain fiscal times, or how do you think about balancing our fiscal future with the need to fund essential government functions?
I think what folks have to understand is that raising the debt ceiling is about paying our bills. And if you come from middle class, working class roots, you understand that those issues are not partisan. They're not issues that we should politicize. Those are issues that are in the interest of our national security, our national economy, everything. And so I hope that the Congress is not going to use this for leverage for other things, but recognize that we have the interest of the country at stake, and paying our bills, keeping our good credit, not only benefits our country, but also taxpayers with so many issues that we have to deal with.
Yeah, Congress is kind of where campaigning and governing meet in the middle there, in the crossroads. On the campaign trail this last cycle, Democrats criticized tariffs as a hidden sales tax on the American consumer. But President Biden, he's kept the Trump tariffs in place so far. Do you see any value in tariffs?
Well, regardless of a Democrat or a Republican, tariffs, they get paid for by someone. And they're generally the companies that are whose goal is to make a profit. They're not going to just say, hey, we'll eat those costs. Those costs are going to be sent out to consumers, us. And so yeah, there's always a balance that you have to understand exists between fair trade and all of the things that go into a healthy economy. But also, let's not pull any punches if tariffs are going to make prices go up, and that's something that we need to be concerned with.
Should Congress reassert its role in not relieving the president of his duty to exercise tariffs, but reassert its role in granting him so much broad authority that it has in recent years?
I think it goes back to getting things done. And if we're going to be gridlocked, if the Congress is going to be gridlocked, then we're not doing our duty. And so I think that's important for us to take these issues seriously. We need to talk about them. We need to actually get things done, whether it be legislation or what have you, and do what's in the interest of of our not only our constituents locally, but also the American public.
I want to shift gears slightly here, but also something that consumers are watching. The recent assassination attempt, or the assassination of a healthcare executive, of course, grabbed the nation's attention. It also sparked this renewed debate about tensions that may exist between corporate interest and patient care. When you examine the current state of healthcare in America, do you see any immediate steps that Congress can take to make sure that health insurance companies do no harm?
I want to say first and foremost that what happened um, to the victim in that case was wrong. And as a prosecutor, I've had to sit in the room with families who have lost a loved one through violence such as that, what happened in New York, and that is wrong. And so I'm not going to make a connection or give justice to someone who believes that they were doing something and somehow believes that what they were doing was good. It was not. There are ways in this country, in a democracy, the greatest democracy that this world has seen, there are ways that we address issues with respect to statutes, whether it be laws, whether it be regulations, and we do that through healthy dialogue, through voting and representatives being in office, serving their constituents. That's how we deal with these types of issues, not through violence. That is never the answer. And so, obviously, my heart goes out to that family, to his family as well, and his loved ones, because it is terrible. Now, the second part of your question with respect to healthcare, that is something that we do need to address. We need to make certain that folks aren't going to go bankrupt because they have a health crisis. I've had serious eye surgeries, and had I not had health care, I would have been buried under debt and things of that nature. So I've experienced this firsthand, and having to go into debt because you can't work, you have to miss work. And at the time, I was a small business owner. I had my own practice, and as a result, I didn't have any income coming in. But fortunately, with as an attorney, I was able to recover. But there are a lot of folks who don't have that same luxury. A lot of people don't have even what I had. And so that's something that we need to address. We need to understand what regular Americans are dealing with, because it is something that needs to be addressed. And that's something that I've been an advocate for, bringing a spotlight to the needs to reform not only healthcare and the way it's delivered, but also how that connects with the criminal justice system.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's so many things that we need to address, and I think it's a topic that we need to take seriously.
I look forward to seeing that debate unfold in Congress. I know you're shifting your focus to a new role just this week, but this is the last time that we will speak to you as the St. Louis County prosecutor before you swear the oath of office in D.C. Right now, you're pushing to expel Councilman Dennis Hancock from office over that nepotism hire, illegal in the Constitution, and more recently expanding your scope of that investigation to also charge the clerk for taking steps to reverse the payments that were made to Hancock's stepdaughter to change her employment status in the government record system in the county. When you brought criminal charges against St. Louis County Clerk Diane Valenti, where did you see the criminal intent there? Some people might look at her actions and think maybe she was just doing what she was told.
Well, without going into too much into what is an active investigation, as a former professor, students would ask, well, what do I need to do to get this grade? And what I would tell them all the time is that I don't give grades, you earn grades. And as a prosecutor, we don't give charges, you earn charges based on what you've done. And in this case, the county councilman violated the nepotism rules. It's clear, and Mark, you have that information. We laid that out for the public to see. The nepotism laws were violated, and it's our duty to follow the law, bring our quo rento, which is our constitutional duty. We've done that. And so the courts will ultimately make a decision as this process works through. With respect to any defendant charged, we have the evidence Some of this evidence is overlaps with the quo warranto, but I think it's pretty clear what occurred, and that it wasn't just in the course of business, but instead there were actions that we believe um, rose to the level of criminal behavior. Now, that will be defendants are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. And so we're going to let that process play through the courts. Obviously, my predecessors will be dealing with that. But we're going to let that process play out. Everyone has their day in court, and any defendants charged will have theirs.
So I didn't hear anything in there that spoke to her criminal intent that might clarify whether or not she was just following orders. Does that
I
make a
think
difference
that
in how you would conceal and how you would secure a conviction?
Yeah, I think that I think the evidence speaks for itself, some of which um, um, you all are aware of, and we're going to let that process play out. We still have a duty, and I'm still the prosecutor until the end of the day,
Hmm.
to ensure that any and all defendants have a fair trial. And so the reason why I'm somewhat limited in what I'll say is because I want to ensure that even beyond my administration, that this defendant will have a fair trial, and we're not going to have that trial through the media. That said, in the time that I've served as prosecutor, we have never and never would prosecute anyone without having the evidence. And in this case, we stand by our evidence, some of which you are aware of. But to that point, to that end, um, Ms. Valente, any defendant that's charged will have their day in court, and that process will play out as it's supposed to.
Sure, and I do appreciate the transparency here. I understand there's this tension between trying a criminal matter in a court of public opinion, but also you said yourself, transparency is important here. So I want to ask you about a specific part of this case. You're a lawyer, of course. You're familiar with the code of ethics. Sam Page's government lawyer, Dana Red Wing, or someone in the room with her, privately recorded that phone call that she had with Councilman Hancock. You introduced that phone call as supporting evidence, at least giving it to us in the media. So presumably you would know who else was in the room with her. How do you view Dana Red Wing's actions within the context of legal ethics, and what kind of precedent would this set for her or in similar cases like this?
I think why I don't have any concern with it is that if you listen to the beginning of the call, she makes it clear that her role is not representing him at that point. I think that she was very clear on that. I think that, as I said at the press conference, when we looked at this investigation, there were some folks who did things the right way. And I extend that to some folks in county who in the county government who resisted the temptation to be potentially put under not only state, county laws, but federal exposure. And I think that the county counselor's office in this case, who have taken their lumps, but I want to be clear, they did everything they were supposed to do. They did everything right. When you listen to the phone call, the county counselor made it clear what she was doing, what her role was, who she represented, who she didn't represent, and obviously, I think that if we're talking about an investigation, I think it's important that we be transparent. That was done. No rights were violated, and I think that as far as how this will be resolved, it'll be resolved in the courts where it should be resolved, and the courts will make that call.
Yeah, I want to ask about timing real quick, and we'll move on. All of this had already occurred. All of these items that we're discussing, the phone call, the actions to the cover up, as you've called it, they all happened before you brought your first quo warranto push to expel Dennis Hancock, or right around the same time there. Why didn't you have all of this evidence prepared back before you brought the first case?
It wasn't about not being prepared. It was the expectation of what was going to happen. The statute calls for the immediate suspension of duties when a quo warranto is brought. So we didn't believe that we needed to bring this information. Now, had that happened, had that occurred, these post actions, if you will, would have many of those likely would not have occurred because many of those what the cover up, which we saw and which we charged, occurred after we filed. As a matter of fact, there are even emails that were released to you all that discuss that, and it shows the timeline of when they happened. So we didn't feel the need to do this. We filed a quo warranto prior to, and we didn't need to do that. In this case, we believe that because of misinformation, I think the courts were misled. I believe that folks in the counselor's office and county council members were misled, and it began this entire cover-up, which we saw, which the evidence shows county documents were changed, altered to create a false narrative, even sent out to a registered lobbyist to further that false narrative. And so we think I felt that it's important that because of the false narratives, the false information that was put out there, the public was misled. And I pull no punches when it comes to who I represent. I stand with the men and women of the county prosecutor's office, but I work for the public, and the public was misled. And I thought that it was important for the public to see the evidence, see exactly what was going on, and then it'll be resolved accordingly.
Yeah, some of this might start to sound like inside baseball, and the palace intrigue or the power struggle really isn't all that interesting, but a lot of the work of the prosecutor's office is incredibly important to public safety. One part of this that was particularly concerning was the lobbyist that you cited in your evidence and that you just named there. Well, we can identify her as Jane Duker. She published an unredacted internal grand jury document, presumably from your office. That public disclosure revealed the name of the grand jury foreperson, the very same grand jury foreperson who was signed off on murder charges. Duker's claiming that that disclosure was a failure of your office to protect the grand jury. How do you respond to that?
I think that as she's not only a registered lobbyist, she is an attorney. And attorneys, we have rules of ethics, and that was well beyond with the rules of ethics or just the right thing to do. She put out on social media an international website grand jury information. I think that is indefensible. I think that it is wrong. And I think that we need to get to the bottom of it. And if I had more time as the county prosecutor, that's what I would do. That said, at the press conference, and I'll say it again to you, Mark, I believe that there does need to be an investigation done with respect to grand jury leaks. From our understanding is that there was information that was leaked prior to a decision even being made in the grand jury. Putting that information out on Twitter is not only inappropriate, but also I think that there's a possibility that beyond ethics, there is a potential that criminal actions occurred. But either way, it was wrong. And we need to know what happened. I think that it's important that we know exactly what happened. And if we find out that there wasn't anything untoward, so be it. But we need to know why grand jury information is being leaked and why it's being leaked to a particular registered lobbyist.
Well, there's a very small number of people who could have had access to this. You're saying you wish you had more time to investigate it. Are you saying you don't know who's leaking to her?
So what I do say is that as a prosecutor, I don't talk about things without the evidence. And so I think it would be inappropriate for me to make conjectures or guesses as to whom it could be, and I won't do that. And so that said, I believe that there should be this matter should be investigated. We should do our best to get to the bottom of it. Obviously, today is my last day, and so that will go on to my predecessors, not only at the county prosecutor's office, but also in county government to get to the bottom of these particular potential criminal and ethical violations.
Well, thank you for your time. This is our last time calling you Congressman-elect Wesley Bell. We look forward to catching up with you again once you've been sworn in and as we continue to follow your work on Capitol Hill. Thanks for your time.
Anytime.